I'd like to welcome Mark Milanovich, Dakota Melin, and Sid Tangerine to the discussion this week. We're going to talk all about Buchla stuff, and let's get started by having, we'll have Mark, let's introduce yourself and the project that you're working on.
All right, excellent. I'm actually working with a project called MEMS, which is an acronym, stands for Modular Electronic Music Systems. The acronym MEMS actually came from one of Don Buchla's original schematics for some of the 100 series systems. Before he called it the Buchla Electronic Music System, he called it the Modular Electronic Music System. So our entire project revolves around recreating and completely cloning the system from the 100 series all the way to the 200 series. And we've tried to do it in a chronological way where we've kind of went back to those old design, the old design ways from the 60s, and we've adopted that in the way that we clone and manufacture them.
Very cool. And what prompted your interest in the Buchla instruments, Mark?
Like most people, I think Eurorack was probably the tipping point for me. I got into Eurorack, and a lot of the Eurorack stuff that I really liked, I realized was kind of rooted in Buchla, specifically some of the make noise instruments, of course, and other things like that. So once I got into that mindset and like played with that architecture, I kind of pined for the real thing. So around that time, I started picking up cloning. So I was working on the Roman clones. And that's kind of what got me into it. That was like the slippery slope.
Cool. We'll move over to Dakota next. Dakota, you're no stranger to frequency freaks. You've been on our workshops before, and many people in our area who are familiar with you already through some of the work that you've done. But I'd like you to introduce yourself and specifically what is bringing you to Buchla and what you've been working on with regards to Buchla over the last little while.
I've been getting into Buchla more than I ever started looking at it before in the last probably 2 years. And what really kickstarted it was I fell like head over heels for the Serge modular system. And I bought original panels, and I've been trying to buy new panels, and I just went crazy for this stuff after Eurorack, similar to Mark. And then I kept hearing that a lot of the ideas in Serge were almost a response to the Buchla system. Like it was designed as a alternative, as a something you could do when you couldn't afford a Buchla. So it always was in the back of my mind to really jump into Buchla and see what it was all about. And and the designs are just fascinating. Like I'm very, very interested in it on like a technical level, because the feats of engineering for the time that it was, it's like you see ideas in Buchla circuits that's like they're current. Like they're still good ideas, and he was trying to make them like you assume that this must have been like late 80s. It's like, no, the schematic says 1978. Like he was trying this way before anyone else. It's really fascinating.
Very cool. And Sid, tell us a little bit about yourself and what brings you to Buchla.
My history with Buchla was I was doing my undergrad at OCAP here in Toronto, and they had a Buchla system. They had an original 200 system, which Don Buchla brought to Toronto himself. We can get into that later in this talk as well. That was actually the first modular system that I learned anything modular on. Like I had Korg MS-20 Mini before that, but that was, I never really messed around with the patching bay because that was just too complicated for me at the time. And I was doing Sunday shifts at the equipment cage, and I was mostly by myself. And then so I had the opportunity to play around with it when they kind of had it storage in there. That's what got me really interested in Buchla, and was kind of dumb from it. Like, it just kind of landed on me. And since I've graduated, I haven't had access to it, not easy access to it. But I've played with Eurorack and other modular system, and always wanted to go back to that. And Dakota built me a system. And then, so now I'm back in it again.
Cool. So I'm just going to take a minute to talk about myself and my own exposure to Buchla, which is very, very tiny. I've heard a couple of performances by Suzanne Ciani and Morten Subotnik and Alessandro Cortini. And of course, I have a bunch of recordings from those folks as well that I love. And the thing that strikes me about the Buchla system is how people use the word organic with reference to Buchla systems and their sound, but these are at their roots electronic systems, and I'm not sure if organic is the right word for it, but they're very musical. And I would almost give the word organic to it myself, but all I know is what I've heard. The music that I've heard made on these instruments, and that's something that has fascinated me, and it has tempted me. I've had thoughts of selling all my Eurorack, kind of like what Sid did, and
you just got to do it.
And going the route of Buchla.
I did it too. I have no regrets.
I have a lot of stuff back here that I really like, though, so that'll be a tough decision. But it is something that's noodling around in the back of my brain. So I'm glad you guys are here, because I mean this is as much for me to learn from you guys as it is for everybody else who's watching Frequency Freaks. So a little bit of selfishness here, but we're also spreading the love through the community as well. So that's my experience with it. And Sid, as your system is relatively new to you, why don't you tell us a little bit about it? We can see it. We can't see a lot of it.
Yeah, it's right here.
Yeah, we can see the whole thing. It's just we can't see any detail in it from there. But tell us how you're using it, the style of music that you're making with it, what it means to you as an instrument. I always have a fairly personal connection with my instruments, so some of that would help too.
This system is basically, as I was saying, I had the access to the original Buchla 200 system when I was going to school, and to be very honest with you, I didn't really know a lot about Buchla stuff. That was just the things that I got to play with. And later I realized, that was actually a big deal. So ever since I left school, I haven't had a chance to play with that. So my very idea about 2 or 3 years ago, when I was seriously looking into getting a system built for myself, the idea was very simple, just to get a replica of the same system. So it's, we got the dual oscillator here. We got 2 of them. This is exactly how they were set up. We're missing one module from that system that I never actually that module. Dakota, you can explain that a little bit more. I never played with that module when it was on the other system. But then I found some old photos, and we did the sketchy zoom in, and we figured out what the other module was. So yeah, basically this is a replica of the one that I used at OCAD, and recently I've been doing a lot of just percussion stuff with it, just because the type of music that I make. So it's also sampling from it, kind of a one shot or 4/4 loop, and then I'll sample it, and then it goes to my sampler or drum machine, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, but I'm also waiting for Dakota's sequencer to arrive at some point so I can play with it on the full scale instead of the Eurorack scale.
Let's go to you next, Mark, and you've got a fairly impressive system set up behind you there. You could tell us a little bit about that.
All right. So this system originally was started as a small case, and like most things, started getting bigger and bigger. In the plan for this case was to be a complete quadraphonic setup. So at some point, I haven't picked up like a pair of speakers or preamps or anything to complete this because I've been working so much with the circuits. It takes a long time. But I can actually show you some of the stuff in here. So this is mainly what I was going to use for quadraphonic control is the spatial director. So you can actually take a sound and move the sound around in quad space. Whole idea is you can actually fade sounds in and out, like naturally, have them come in and out. So because of this, I have, I originally wanted to add another oscillator, but I have my 258 here, which is a 2 oscillator, and then the 259, which you can technically use as 2 oscillators if you tune one up into audio range. Basically, that was the gist of the system, was just to get something that can do more like sound sculpture, where I could actually get people in a room and actually have sound bounce around. And that's one of the things that Susan Ciani pioneered was spatial sound. That was really big for Don. He was really big on that forefront, quad being like the new frontier.
Yeah, that was actually pretty important from Martin Subotnick as well, from what I've heard from him too. I've had the good fortune to hear Suzanne speak a couple of times as well. Once when she was here in Toronto, and I can't remember where I heard her speak. The other time it was probably at Moogfest, I think in 2016 when she played there. But yeah, quadraphonic sound seems to be something that's important to a lot of people who are playing with Buchla systems. I'm curious, your spatializer there. Are you able to take CV control over the spatialization as well?
Oh, absolutely. You can actually, you can actually trick it into thinking it's receiving a joystick motion by feeding it CV. Really cool. And to think about when this thing came out, we're talking early 70s, he was making a spatializer like this. Actually, the first spatializer he made was probably mid-60s, believe it or not. There was a module in the 100 series that he called it's actually the 113 is the model number. It was actually made for David Tudor. And that was quintraphonic, which was for 5-speaker systems. So the whole idea was you had a quad system, and then you had a down-firing center speaker that was over the performer. So you could create like a dome of audio. Really interesting concept. Wow.
I think I would really like to play with a system like that around me at some point. I've looked at doing that with Eurorack and backed away from it a number of times. So Dakota, it is, yeah.
Yeah.
Dakota, you're the only one who doesn't have a Buchla system beside you or behind you. Like, what's going on?
It's all downstairs in the garage, which is usually so. My modular systems, they don't generally make it up into. This is like a studio space that I share with my father. Firstly, because he doesn't play them. Secondly, because it's usually kind of stress relief for me when I work on the thing I built for a bit to take away the stress of the thing I'm building. Is the way modular usually works for me. I'm working on a system for myself that actually is very close to Sid's. Because the thing about Sid's system is that selection of modules was basically what Don Buchla selected and delivered, like his idea of a smaller instrument, and it really is well kitted out, well thought out. It's all the tools you need to be rewarding in a it's two 259s. So you got 4 VCOs, you got 4 LPGs, you've got your source of uncertainty like noise, randomness, sample and hold. You've got your and the one module that we're gonna still build is the 257. So CV management is the only thing that's kind of missing right now. But I'm fairly certain that is the system I'm going to build for myself too. And that's what draws me to Buchla is like you said, like you started looking at what it would take to do quadraphonic in Eurorack. And it's frustrating because you find out that you're going to have to make concessions across all these different manufacturers that have inputs and outputs in different spots. They have different CV ranges. They have different ideas of how certain things should go, which is fine, and there's a place for that. But when you invest in a Buchla system, you're investing in a very well thought out approach to sound design that comes to you as like a system to learn, an instrument to learn. And it made a huge difference for me when I was exposed to that coming from Eurorack and even like monosynths. They're a little bit more limited. It's like, oh, okay, all of a sudden a really complicated instrument, there's a language here that I can learn, that I can build on, that if I replace one part, that language I don't have to learn a new one. Because I'm going to be replacing it with another thing that Buchla made that will speak the same language, that will be used the same way, that needs to be approached in a similar way. And that's the value of Buchla to me right now, is the time you put into it as an instrument, you keep that value because you're learning a system.
That's a really interesting observation. Sid, do you want to talk about how that applies to you and how that has informed your use of your current system versus what you used to use at OCAD?
Yeah. So, like I was saying, the 200 system of OCAD was the first module since ever I got to play with. And the Buchla system kind of has a banana jack and for CV, and the CV and gates and the mini jacks for audio. So as a beginner or for someone who doesn't know what's really going on, it's kind of laid out for you, as opposed to Eurorack, for example. Then you don't really know the ins and outs. Buchla kind of divided that into 2 separate lanes and go, hey, here's a banana and here's a mini. So for me, that was easier to learn. And I also didn't mention that the system that I was playing with wasn't fully working. So it added a little bit of challenge. But later that I learned that, they are all kind of struggling at all times, whether they're fully working or not. What gravitated me towards it was that it didn't really have a keyboard. It had a touch plate with a joystick. I don't remember the model number or the module number. It was a touch plate with the joystick. I think at Mark or Dakota, you guys can probably identify that.
It was a 219.
Could have been a 221. That was the one with the joystick on it.
Like it had the little like crystal joystick. Almost.
Yeah, it was like it was like a stainless joystick, but it was the keyboard that would wiggle side to side.
Yeah.
They disabled it. Yeah, they disabled the wiggle on a lot of those models because it didn't work too well.
Yeah. One of the technicians was trying to show he was trying to show it to me because he was actually a student when John Buchla brought it to the school, and he was trying to show me the touch play, and the whole time he was trying to wiggle it. And then I've seen a lot of YouTube videos about it, and I was like, I don't know what this guy is doing, because I was like, I don't think that's a thing. I know about the pressure contact was how much amount of skin is applied to the pressure plate, kind of that sends out a CV, but I have no idea why he was wiggling it. That totally makes sense now.
a lamp at the bottom of the case usually, and then there's an optocoupler in the bottom of the keyboard. So when you wiggle it, it actually works like you can send that signal to anything. You could have it be a vibrato. You could have it change any parameter on the Buchla. Kind of an interesting, like, three-dimensional way to play the thing.
And there was one of the Yamaha, I think, combo organs that had a very similar thing. So you wonder who stole whose idea, you know? Because the Yamaha organs would have a long strip of felt, and there was a strip of felt on the bottom of every key. So when you press the key down, the felt lock into each other. And then if you wiggled the key, it would pull the ribbon that was opening and closing a little shutter.
Yep.
Like the craziest system.
It's amazing. To kind of add to that whole design process in terms of Don and his panel layout and his workflow, one of the things that kind of set him apart from all the other manufacturers at the time was, if you look at like Bob Moog on one hand, he was a brilliant engineer. He designed the circuits first, and then he designed the panel afterwards. And one of the things Don always believed in was if you want to create an instrument and actually have people be able to play it and interface with it completely, you have to design it from the outside in. So what he would do is design the panels, figure out everything he wanted it to do, and then that would actually force him to figure out how to make the circuit do exactly what he wanted it to do. That kind of bred a lot of creativity because he wanted the system to do things that no one ever wanted the things to do before. Real interesting design philosophy.
So built from the perspective of the performer.
Right. And then that's
which
how
is something that Dr. Moog always talked about. He always talked about designing things for musicians. But it's interesting to note that Don Buchla actually seems to have embraced that a little bit more.
Right. Don was a brilliant guy. He was very forward-thinking, but his strongest point, I believe, was his interfacing. Anything, with his touch interfaces, which... he just wanted the performer to be able to connect to the instrument as much as possible. And the only way to do that really is to, like I was saying, just design everything as if you wanted it, if you were designing it, if you the musician were designing it. And in fact, that's how his 100 series actually started. He didn't have a real idea of what the 100 series was to be. He just got commissions from Mort Subotnick or David Tudor or any of these musicians, and they would say, hey, I want a module that does this. And he'd be like, okay, and he'd make a module that did exactly that. I think it wasn't until the 200 series where he really had a focus, like he really had this vision for this complete system. That was like his masterpiece.
One of the recent little, you hear little snippets and legends, whatever you want to call them. One of the things I read recently about Don Buchla that was really interesting, and it figures into that, is that he was actually more protective of the faceplates, the layout of the faceplates, the interface, his work on how the instrument presented. He was more protective of that than the circuits.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that goes without saying. He's been quoted, as saying like he doesn't mind about the cloners. He was more confused with why people wanted the old stuff. If you had brought up an old module to him, he'd be like, "Well, why do you want that? The 200E does this." He was very frustrated.
You should see what I've made this year.
Just like musicians. I don't want to play my old stuff. I want to play my new stuff.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Come out to my show. Are you going to play any hits? No.
He had so many ideas in his head that he had to get out, and there's so many things that he didn't do that he wanted to do because there just wasn't enough time, And that's, I think, one of the reasons why they say he was so forward-thinking. He didn't have time to really be nostalgic about anything. He just had to get all the ideas out.
Interesting, dude. I remember seeing an interview with Martin Subotnick, and it wasn't so long ago, probably 3 or 4 years ago, which means the interview was probably 5 or 8 years ago, probably. and he was talking about working with Don on the design of instruments, and Don had asked him at one point, well, do you want a keyboard? And Morton's response was, no, I want something that's different. I want to make new sounds. I don't want to use a traditional interface. I want to use a new interface. And one of the interfaces that to me just screams Buchla, and I don't even know what the interface is called, but it's got all these sloping touch interfaces coming together and a bunch of pads around it, or within it, around those sliding ribbons, whatever they are. And maybe you can help me and tell me what it's called.
Oh, that's the 223. The 223. That's the kinesthetic input port.
Great. Yeah. And this is why I have trouble with Buchla. I mean, these things don't have names. In Eurorack, people complain about noise engineering and the names of their interfaces. But man, you remember Loquela Guitaritas, 221, 219, 215, 343, 567. I mean, how do you remember that stuff? I can't.
It's all like I've been living and breathing this stuff for like the past 3 years. It's just been a fever dream.
Well, and it's funny because Mark and I have been working a little bit on some of our the Serge, looking at the Serge modular system, like some of the original PCBs and stuff, and learning how it all worked. And Mark will start calling things like the 106, the 107. And it's like, Mark, we don't do numbers here, man. it's a VCO. Like.
I think it was funny when my friend and I, my friend Chip, he works on this with me. He was on, we were on Source of Uncertainty podcast, and he's reading off numbers, and he's like, in the middle of his sentence, he's like, oh yeah, I forgot we don't do numbers. He's like, I got to read what this module is. He had like a cheat sheet. It was hilarious.
So he knows the numbers better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I guess when you're working with it day in, day out, that helps.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it would help me, but it seems like it helps other people. So, Mark, what exactly is the MEM project? What are the goals? What are you guys doing?
So the main goal for the project originally was there was this disconnect between the systems that existed out in the wild and the public. There's just these inaccessible systems that are kind of under lock and key at all these institutions nationwide. And we were really frustrated with it at first because it almost seemed like there was this like shroud of mystery like surrounding Buchla. We have the clones as the only that's the only communicator of Buchla to the general public, where a lot of people that collect the stuff, it's like you barely see it. You barely hear about it. You barely get to hear any of the modules working. Some of the rarer modules, you just see like a grainy picture, like the size of a nickel. It's like, what is this? What am I looking at? So
it's like Sid and I were looking through old photos of the system he's talking about, and we were like, enhance, zoom. Yeah. What is that?
Yeah. It's bad. So we decided to set out to recreate these systems and replicate them completely, and even down to every last detail, the circuit boards, the parts used. We tried to hunt down as many new old stock parts as possible for two reasons. One, so we could complete systems that were missing modules. So like if an academic institution wanted to complete a system, they could order modules from us to complete the system as it was intended. Also, if engineering students wanted, or even just people that were interested in the system wanted to take stuff apart and really look it over, they didn't have to really tear apart an old module. They have a complete replica of it that they can study. And so far, we've been to a few colleges. We were at Wesleyan University in Connecticut to look at some of their early 100 series modules. We were just at University of Illinois taking apart their whole 200 series. So a lot of people are catching wind of what we're doing and, expressing interest. At a certain point, what I'd like to do is get workshops started, maybe bring some modules in as kits, have students build them up and really learn a lot about the system from the ground up. They can actually put it together. And I think that's just a hands-on approach that I don't think anybody's ever been able to offer for any system, really.
Excuse me.
That would be a cool thing to do. Once we're all able to get together in person again, I wonder if maybe we'd be able to work something out either between Frequency Freaks or the Toronto Sound Festival even to get something like that together. Are there no copyright or patent issues with any of these things?
The system is coming around. I think the 200 series this year hit the 50-year anniversary. So right now, as it stands, there's really no copyright for the 100 or the 200. There's a lot of shady ground, who owns what. There's a lot of, people claiming they own certain aspects of the system. I think that's one of the reasons why we haven't just hit the ground running and just started selling modules at a website. It's one of those things. Kind of have to tiptoe around it. But at the same time, the 200 and the 100 is at this point public, it's entered the public domain. Nobody's releasing a 100 series. I mean, last I checked, I don't even think Buchla USA actually owns the copyright to them. It's really just a couple people that bought it from CBS. From Don, after Don, sold it to CBS, and that was really what ended the 100 series. Interesting.
So, Dakota, you've been quiet for a lot of the time. I'm going to pick on you for a minute here because I know you like to build stuff and work on things, and I know that you made a bit of an announcement in some of the more secretive groups on recently saying that you might be open to building systems for people. Is that something that you're actually doing now?
Yeah, I had a few people who are interested. Most people, it's something they're working towards. I'm not going to keep a huge inventory to come and shop here. It's gonna be like, if you have a decision or if you want some input as to what a system to start with would look like, I can help. And what really kickstarted that was I'm really excited. I've known about the work that Mark's been doing for a while, and it's top notch. There's some other people who are also involved in making some of these things more accessible. And I'd always been a little bit afraid of the Roman clones because they are quite expensive and generally have things that you have to fix. So a lot of know-how goes into building even the clones. Like, the clones are supposed to be made as easy as possible for you to make. Well, good luck, because it's still tricky. I mean, they were working with parts that had such wide variances, like getting Bactrols to play together with other Bactrols, which are if anyone watching doesn't know what that is, it's like a light reacting with a shot of cadmium inside of a plastic tube. There's not a lot of accuracy in a part like that. They slop around, and you got to tune the rest of the circuit around it. It's just, there's no other way to do it. So yeah, I ended up working through kind of what I would consider nightmare builds, where literally everything went wrong. And now I'm not afraid of it anymore. So.
Well, thank goodness for perseverance. Sid, where is your instrument going to go next? I mean, we talked a bit about the sequencer, I think, that Dakota's going to be making. What else? How do you see that system progressing? Is that a complete system for you at this point, or do you see it expanding?
I like to fill this case and get the sequence from Dakota and hopefully stop there. The very idea still go back to the system that I played with at OCAT. Going back to what I was talking about, the touch plate didn't work. The only thing I was able to use to send the variable CVs was a joystick. So I was playing around the system with just a joystick while trying to figure out some of the modules and what this one does and what not. So I think this system on its own is a very complex instrument already, and I went down the rabbit hole of Eurorack and sold everything and all that kind of stuff. So I hopefully this doesn't grow into next time you see me, this doesn't go like all the way up. Yeah, but I definitely Dakota showed me. I'm mainly just here to plug Dakota. Dakota showed me the prototype of a sequencer, which I'm really interested in. So that's something I want to get because he was just explaining to me the other day that you don't really get the full range on the oscillators with anything in Eurorack. So I want something flexible in that for that, but I don't think it's gonna get any bigger. I was happy to learn on that system, and I still have really long recordings of just me plugging away with this joystick, and I still have lots of recordings from that, and I was happy playing with it basically. So I don't think I will be unhappy with this, and so I don't think it should grow any bigger. Buchla was, yeah. Other things I don't know.
So what Eurorack sequencers did you have? I think it was a Rene and a Metropolis.
Yeah, so I had Metropolis to go with System 100M, which I think IntelliJoy was, well, now we're drifting away from Buchla. Briefly, IntelliJoy was designing this module kind of based on Roland's philosophies. And I just wanted something for the time being to send unquantized CV. So I just have a rename for that. But obviously it doesn't go the full 0 to 10 volt range. But I make it work. So.
Yeah, all I was gonna say is like the two sequencers you had are kind of based around like quantized outputs, and the Rene has kind of I think that the highest voltage is like 4.6 volts. I think you said, or somewhere
3.5. Like might have,
which is great for like melodic Eurorack 1 volt per octave, but it's like Buchla is 1.2 volt per octave. And you don't think that's a big difference, but over a couple octaves, it's like all of a sudden you got one less octave on a sequence. You get like the Eurorack stuff will work, but it feels limiting for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
Cool. I think with that, we're going to end it there. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us for this conversation. I hope everybody out there has found it as interesting and fun, as enlightening as I have. Do either of you have anything else you want to add or interject in the conversation before we sign off for everybody? No?
I think we could go all night.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
There's stuff we can talk about for sure. But we'll save it for another episode.
Awesome. Great. Thank you very much for joining us, guys.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.